This world that we live in is accelerating in the rate of change. I spoke at a conference going back, it would have been 3 or 4 years ago now. It was a conference and they flew this guy out from America. This guy was called a futurist. And what do futurists do? They're supposed to predict the future, yeah? But what he did was he threw up a graph on the screen like this. And the graph was a graph that went like this. It went horizontal, it went sort of like a little gradual incline, and then it kicked up. And what he said was that's the rate of change since civilization was fairly constant, and all of a sudden it kicked up. Where it kicked up was in the mid-90s when the world connected to the internet. Because from that point on, change just started accelerating. When I was a kid growing up, it's probably some of you in my age bracket, when I was a kid growing up, life just ambled from one day to the next. Nowadays, it's racing, and it ain't going to slow down. This particular guy said in this 100-year period that we're in, there's going to be more change in this 100-year period than the past 20,000 years. 20,000 years squeezed into 100 years is a lot of change. And we've seen that already. We're seeing it already. Some of it's positive, but a lot of it's perceived as not so positive because we feel threatened. But it really is a frame of mind. I think that comes back to the point that a lot of us don't realise how much potential we have. All of us were born into this world with an incredible amount of potential. So much potential that we will never realise our full potential in our lifetime because we have that much capacity. And because also there's only so many directions that we have time to go down. But the fact is that a lot of us don't even realise, most of us don't even realise what we're capable of. We don't really understand. The Steve Jobs, who was the man that basically took Apple from being a concept to being the world's greatest brand, he has an interesting, he had a wonderful career, passed away recently, but he had a philosophy that I think is incredibly valuable and practical for all of us. Just watch this little clip. First of all, we'll see a guy talking about Steve Jobs' achievements, then have a look what Steve says. Everything around us was created by people with no more potential than us. But the fact is, a lot of us don't realise what the potential we have. The other important point that Steve Jobs mentioned was that if we poke something here, we do something here, it has a consequence over there. We poke in the wrong spot, we live the wrong actions, then we're going to get the wrong outcomes, the wrong consequences. We live the right outcomes, right actions, we get the right consequences, right outcomes. And from my point of view, I didn't quite get this as a kid. And growing up in Balmain, I grew up in East Balmain. My dad was a council worker. Like our council, my mum worked in the Colgate palm olive factory down in Balmain. We lived in a one-bedroom section of part of a house, a weatherboard house in 10 Duke Place. There was one bedroom. There were actually 3 bedrooms in our section of the house. There was a lounge room, there was a kitchen, and there was a bedroom. I had the top bunk, and my 2 younger brothers and my mum and dad, we all squeezed into this bedroom. And there was an outdoor shower and toilet we shared with the other guy who owned the property, who lived in the other half of the house, a guy called Mr. Cook. Anyhow, I was always driven as a kid. I was the oldest of 3 boys, always wanted to do my best. I want to make my parents proud, like a lot of kids do. And my big dream, because my parents had been encouraging me to really try and fulfill my potential. Because remember, my dad worked on the council, my mum worked in the Colgate palm olive factory. My big dream was to push past what they had achieved and to get a trade. Yep. So I going into high school, I can remember my parents, you got to get a trade, son. And not only that, you got to get a job for the government because that's a job for life, guaranteed for life. So I can remember coming home from school one day because I saw this telecom technician working on the side of the road and he was chatting to me. And he said, "This is such a good job. Boy, what's your name?" I wanted to be a telecom technician because it was a trade, it was a job for the company. This is a true story. And I can remember my Uncle Bruce coming over at Christmas at the end of that first year at high school. It was Ibrox Park Boys High School then, it's now Leichhardt High School. And my uncle was over there at Christmas time, Uncle Bruce. My mum said, tell Uncle Bruce what you're going to do, Wayne. I remember Uncle Bruce to this day. So I'm going to be a telecom technician. And Uncle Bruce said, fantastic. I've got a phone in my house, but when I get my second phone, I'm going to wait till you get that apprenticeship and you're going to put it in. Anyhow, I never quite got there. He's still waiting for the phone to get put in. But what actually happened was my whole world changed a couple of years later because I remember we went on holidays and because we didn't have any money in the house. My dad was a gambler as well, and he drank a lot of alcohol and all that sort of stuff. But we went on holidays up to a place called Mumble. Now, does anybody know where Mumble is? Okay, it's just up the road from Eucarina, near Stewarttown. Yeah, you know where that, yeah, you've got to know where Stewarttown is. Nah, it's actually out near Wellington in Western New South Wales. So we packed all the gear in the back of the Zephyr. Remember the old Zephyrs, yeah? You young people got no idea. In the back of the Zephyr, headed up, chugged up the Great Western Highway. There was no M4s or anything. Great Western Highway through Katoomba, through Lithgow, through Bathurst, through Orange, through Stewarttown, through Eucarina. We get to Mumble 6 hours later. Stinking hot. January, it was about 40 degrees. My dad was sweating like a pig. He wasn't a really fit guy. And he said, I can't stay up here. I can't stay up here. We were supposed to stay for 2 weeks. He headed back after one day and said, I'm going to come and pick you up in 2 weeks. Anyhow, what happened was the next day, we ended up staying 2 weeks because the next day the police came to the door and said that my dad had a massive heart attack and was in Prince Alfred Hospital in Camperdown. So we couldn't afford to fly back. And my grandparents' car was too small to drive us all back. So we had to wait 14 hours for an overnight train to come through. And that train picked us up overnight all the way back to Sydney. By the time we got to Central Railway, a police officer, friend of my dad's, was there and gave us the news that he died. So for me, that was a really, it was like a massive knife in the belly because I was actually very close to my dad. And we were doing it tough anyway. And I thought, as the oldest of three boys, what are we going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to turn this around? And I actually just went off the rails. I got mixed up with a couple of the wrong people, got involved in a bit of a gang, because Balmain was a pretty rough place in those days, so different now. And I went off the rails. My mum was busy just trying to make ends meet, and she was frustrated because I wasn't the sort of kid that I was prior to my dad's death. But what happened was a friend of my dad's came over, and she rang him up, I later found out, to come over and have a chat to me. And most profound change happened to me because he sat me down and he got me talking just about how I was feeling. And I told him I was angry and I didn't want to talk at first, but he extracted stuff out of me, got me to talk about how I felt. And then he said, I'm going to go now, but he said, I want you to have a think tonight about what it is that if you could be anything you could be in the world to make you really happy, what would that be? If you could be anything. And I kept thinking a telecom technician. And I said that to him. He said, no, not what your parents want you to be. If you could do anything that you wanted to do, what would it be? And he left. And that night, I was thinking, and he came back the next day, and it came to me that I wanted to play first grade for the Tigers. So as soon as he sat down, I blurted it out. I said, Mr. Kokas, his name was. Mr. Kokas, I want to play first grade for the Tigers. He said, fantastic. He said, fantastic. He said, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes and he started talking me through scenarios. He got me to visualise what it was like to be playing first grade for the Tigers. He was saying, you're running onto Leichhardt Oval, there's a massive crowd there, they're cheering, Tigers. They kick off the ball, it comes to you, you put a sidestep on, make a big break, score a try, and wow, the crowd cheers. And I was hearing all this noise, I was seeing these images, and he went on for about 20 minutes. At the end of that, he said, open your eyes up now, how do you feel? I said, I feel unbelievably good. He said, great. He said, tonight I want you to go to bed, and I want you to just go through those similar images in bed tonight. He said, I'm going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to talk about a little bit more stuff. So he came back the next day, and he sort of continued in that vein, but what he said was, he said, okay, he said, that's what you want to be. You've got to start telling yourself and that's what it is you really want to be, and you've got to start setting some goals. I'm going to work back as how are we going to get there? How are we going to get how are you going to get to be the first grade player playing for the Tigers. So I set some goals, making the rep team and the next rep team after that. And I worked out that I had to train harder and do this stuff. We worked out a whole plan, him and I. But then he also said, listen, there's not much money in rugby league, a little bit of money, but not much, so you're going to have to get a job. So then he actually encouraged me to think outside the square then, and I set the goal of going to university because Gough Whitlam had come in not long before my dad died and made it free for everybody to go to uni. No HECS, no anything. So, none of my family had ever been to university. My extended family, plenty of them have been to institutions like Long Bay and Silverwater, but none of them to the universities, right? So that laugh, there's a bit of truth in it, unfortunately, but I won't talk about that. But essentially what Mr. Kokas did to me, he actually got inside my head because he actually inspired me around a vision for the future. He got me to set goals, and those goals attracted me to what it was I wanted to be. Because you know what, I quit on myself. I really did quit on myself. But what he did was, he changed my mindset from being one of the sheep, just following everybody else, to actually being a shepherd. And so many of us are actually sheep. We just go along with everybody and we don't actually take control. We don't empower ourselves to really achieve what it is that we want to achieve that will make us fulfilled. Because ultimately life is not about success. Life is about fulfillment. People think success actually breeds fulfillment. Sometimes it does, but not always. What is it that makes you happy? And one of the real, from my point of view, real tragedies is that so many people don't realise the potential they have at a young age and go on. And for me, the actual playing for Australia was symbolic in that it was, the peak of achievement for my football, but that's gone. Now, when I reached that goal, I had to then recreate myself to make it towards other goals. And I think a lot of football players, a lot of Olympians, and we're seeing this with the swimmers and all that sort of stuff, what happens is they fail to recreate themselves. They fail to set new goals that are going to fulfill them. And for a lot of us in life, we get to a point where, and generally I believe life's like four-quarter footy. The old days, those of you can remember the old Amco Cups, that was four-quarter footy, yeah? It was 80 minutes of 4 20-minute quarters. Well, life's a bit like that. We say the average person lives to 80 years of age. There's 4 quarters in that 80 years. The first quarter, the first 20 years, you learn the rules of life. That's what the first 20 years is about. It's what school's about. It's what growing up as a teenager is about. The next 20 years, those rules, we're going to apply those rules because I want to be successful. And what happens is, we apply those rules. For a lot of us, the rules that we applied wear thin and don't apply when we get to about that end of that second quarter, because our priorities shift and change. So this midlife crisis, as it's called, it's actually not a crisis, it's a realisation for a lot of people that, you know what, I've got to reinvent myself. I've got to actually work out what it is that's going to make me fulfilled now, because I've been going through this repetitive pattern for a while, and it's wearing a bit thin. So what do? We actually start to try and reinvent ourselves and work out what makes us happy. So then that's our next 20 years, and hopefully, if we nail that, we can enjoy the final quarter and come home with the winning money. But it's a big part of us being fulfilled is to set goals. And these two guys here, anybody recognise who they might be? They're the two guys that paddled from Foster on the north coast to New Plymouth in New Zealand. Paddled without a motor, the two of them across the Tasman. 60 days, 60 days it took them to get there. A lot of people have tried and perished previously. These two guys made it. Why? Because they had a new vision, knew where they wanted to go to, they had a plan, and they had the resources and equipment to get there. Yep. But imagine this. Imagine these two guys turn up the little 3-star hotel at Foster the night before they're going to go for a paddle. They've got all this great equipment, but they didn't know where they wanted to go to. Okay, and in the morning, James Casterson and Justin Jones, the two guys' names are, they're from the North Shore of Sydney. James wakes up first and says, Justin's a nice day out there, mate. How about we go for a paddle? Justin says, where do you want to go to? James says, oh, mate, why don't we just put the kayak in the water, and what we'll do is we'll just start paddling and see where we end up. Where would they end up? Because I know where they'd end up. It wouldn't be New Plymouth in New Zealand, but where they would end up would be where the wind and the waves and the current push them. The wind and the waves and the current. That's where they'll end up. Where do most people in life end up? Honestly. Where other stuff pushes us around. Where the wind and the waves and the current push people. Why? Because a lot of us, we're not strategic in our lives. I don't know whether you own your own business, whether you work for another company, whatever. But most businesses have strategic plans. What's a strategic plan? Basically, it's a plan, a long-term plan of where we want to get to. Why do businesses do that? Because it's important for the success of the business. How many people, individuals, how many of you have a strategic plan? That is, you know exactly where you want to get to down the track. In not just your career, I'm talking about in your health, in your relationships, in your finances, in all the different facets of your life. Why don't you, if you don't? I'll tell you why. Because we're creatures of habit and we've never done it. And you know what? I'm looking around. No one else has got these strategic plans or goals. Incorrect. Because every single Olympic athlete has a strategic plan. Because most good Olympians don't plan just for what they're doing next year. They're looking at the next Olympics or 2 Olympics down the track if they're maybe a 14 or 15-year-old. I know when I was 14 and my mentor came into my life, I started looking 5-6 years down the track. And that wasn't just in relation to football, it was also in relation to what I wanted to do academically. I ended up going to uni and doing a science degree, doing a dip ed, and ended up teaching for a little while. But the big thing, the point around this goal setting is that it is so simple that people think I can't possibly be that effective. But it is. The other thing is, I ask the question, are you a sheep or are you a shepherd? Are you somebody who just goes along with everybody else and doesn't understand that if I push here, like Steve Jobs said, there's going to be a reaction over here? And do I understand what buttons I need to push? Do I understand what actions I need to live to get the outcome that I want? Or do I not understand what outcome I want? I've got this fuzzy idea, for example, I want to be healthy. Want to be healthy is not a goal, that's a wish. But if I say I want to lose 9 kilos by December 31 this year, that's a goal because it's measurable. But if I want to be healthy or I want to be rich, they ain't goals, they're just wishes. And it's a big difference because the way we internalise them. When we internalise a goal and we actually start to see what that goal is in our heads, and this is what elite athletes are taught. Sports psychologists work with elite athletes to teach them these skills. Should be taught to every school kid in every school. But when we internalise these goals, guess what happens? The non-conscious brain, via a mechanism called the reticular activating system, starts to act like a radar, and it starts to look for opportunities and stuff that will help me achieve that goal. Great example I had a few years ago, and it stands in my mind because it was at the time when I was doing a lot of research into neuroscience. My daughter, my eldest daughter, had a Hyundai Excel, and a little old car. It was bashed around a bit. She saw this new car came out. It was called a Toyota Yaris. It's not even working. What am I doing? The battery's flat. Can you hear me? Here. Toyota Yaris, right? And I hadn't heard of this Toyota Yaris. Just come out. So anyhow, she takes me up in her car up to the Toyota dealership, which was 15 minutes away. And I had a look at this car and I thought, that's a pretty cool looking car. And she took it for a test drive. And anyhow, we sort of said, oh, we'll have a think about this over the weekend and come back and maybe buy it. I'd never seen it before. On the way home, the 15-minute drive home, I've seen 6 other Yarises. I hadn't seen one before. Why? Because all of a sudden, the Toyota Yaris is on my reticular activating system, I'm now starting to notice it. And there's so many examples in my life where I've set these goals and I didn't know how I was actually really going to achieve these goals, but stuff just pops up because I notice it. And it's part of being mindful. This concept of goal setting also extends to this mindfulness. And we all heard of mindfulness. What's mindfulness? Mindfulness means that I'm consciously co-creating my life because I'm mindful of the actions I'm participating in, but also I place an intention around every single thing that I do. If I go into a meeting with somebody, I place an intention in my mind before I go into that meeting. What's the intended outcome? If I go into a training session, what's my intention for this training session? I don't go into the training session or the meeting just waiting to see what happens. I go in there with an intention. And that intention helps activate the guidance and the direction that I want to head towards. And every one of us have potential access to this resource and this power. Yeah. Whether you're into spirituality or not is not a question that I want to ask anybody. But my own view is that there's a universal energy up there that's waiting for us to harness. There's a whole lot of research now in this field of quantum science. Okay, quantum science is a rapidly growing area of science because there's two lines of thought around the way we function in this world. There's the discipline of Newton and Newton's theories. Yeah, every action there's an equal opposite reaction about the physical world. Then at the other end of the spectrum, there's this Einstein concept, the power of thought, the power of energy, and quantum mechanics. And science has gradually been drawn away from the fact that everything's purely physical as we see it to this other area up here where there's so much that we don't know and so much of the potential that we are capable of, we're just starting to tap at the moment. And a big part of that is this power of thought. The other point, or second point I wanted to make was that so many of us, we may conceive of something, we may think this is what I want, we may set a goal, but so many of us struggle to believe that we're able to achieve that. One of the main jobs of a head coach in a rugby league team is not to teach the players the skills. Okay, the head coach really is there to get inside the heads of the players to get them to believe that they can be their best. Because they've got skills coaches that teach the skills. They've got a fitness guy that teaches the fitness. They've got a sprint coach. They've got a recruitment manager. There are all these other guys. The head coach's job is to coordinate those, but essentially to get inside the heads of the players. Why? Because that's the difference between being good and being great. What's the main difference between someone who's on a street corner at York Street and George Street in town with a sign saying, please donate money to me? What's the difference between that person and someone who's really successful running a company, a big company? It's what's going on inside their head. That's what it is. Okay? And what I call the mind viruses. Mind viruses. They're the scripts that we tolerate and that we actually take on board and give oxygen to. Over the years, we've acquired these mind viruses. They're a whole lot of mind viruses that I've extracted from my mind over the years because I'm aware of actually the process of extracting them. I'm aware of what I've been telling myself. I've developed antivirus software. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't aware that A, you can actually rip these viruses out, and B, the damaging impact they have. They drive fears, they drive anxiety, they drive doubts, and they stop people in their tracks from moving further towards their potential. In fact, it's quite funny that when you talk about players having doubts and mind viruses, I've got to tell one funny story when I was coaching. And I was coaching the Tigers, and it was the very first year I coached the Tigers. And Mark Geyer was at the Tigers. Alan Jones signed him from Penrith, came across to the Tigers, and Mark Geyer was at the club. And one of the very first training sessions that I had with the club, Mark came up to me after training. He said, "Junior, we need to talk." I said, "What's up?" He said, "Well, I'm getting towards the end of my career and I'm a bit worried about what I'm going to do after footy because everyone thinks I'm a thug and I don't think anyone's going to employ me to do work." He didn't use those words because employ is a big word for Mark, but he said, "Got to give me a job." So anyhow, I said, "Well, mate, what do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, you must have some ideas because people everyone sort of looks at you and they don't think you're a thug and I really want some tips on how I can get people to want to give me a job." So anyhow, I said to him, "Mate, what about doing some work in some schools and would you like to go to maybe around the schools, we can get the media, the newspapers, the radio guys along the television to do a story on you to show the soft, sensitive nature of you, and that will get people understanding that you're not just a thug." "Oh, that sounds great. When can I start that?" I said, "Well, you're probably going to need a little bit of training." I said, "Actually, I've got to go to Birchgrove Public School next week." I said, "Why don't you come along and you can observe while I actually do the presentation and just see if you feel comfortable in that environment." Fantastic. So anyhow, we went down to the school. There's a year 5, year 6 group in the school. There was probably about 80 kids, 70, 80 kids there, and boys and girls, probably 11, 12 years of age, 10, 11, 12 years of age. And I've had a chat to them about health and fitness and sport and the value of sport, that sort of stuff. And at the end I thought, well, boys and girls, any questions? I thought, what a great idea to get Mark up, to get a bit of exposure talking to the kids. Right? So I said, "Mark Geyer from the Tigers here. Mark, do you want to come up here?" And he looked a bit sheepish, but he came up on stage. And anyhow, there was a couple of questions for me. And then there was a question down the back, a little chubby kid down the back corner of the room, trying to impress his teacher, obviously, sticks his hand up. So they got a question from Mr. Geyer. And so they took a little microphone over there, gave it to the kid, and the kid said, "Mr. Geyer, I would like to know what's your philosophy on life?" This is a kid that's 10 years of age, right? Trying to impress his teacher, no doubt. And Mark's gone. And I put the microphone, I said, "Mate, just give a couple of little tips on what inspires you. What do you do each day?" Stuff like that. "Oh, yeah, and it's not a fast computer, you got to understand." So he's buying a bit of time. "And what's your favourite food, and you play sport, and your favourite subject?" And then all of a sudden the lights went on, bang. He had something, right? He had something. You could tell Mark had an answer. And he said, "My philosophy on life." He said, "My philosophy on life is that I work hard." He looked at me, and I went, "Great, mate," because that was good. Work hard. And he obviously thought there was something missing. So he said, "Yeah, my philosophy on life is I work hard, I play hard." And he looks at me again. "Mate, it's fantastic, great, good stuff." But he's on a bit of a roll, yeah. "My philosophy on life is I work hard, I play hard, I sleep hard." And I'm thinking, I'm not so sure where that's going. But anyhow, he's on the roll. And he finishes off, my philosophy on life is I work hard, I play hard, I sleep hard, and I wake up hard. So the principal, I think her name was Mrs. Edwards, said, "Boys and girls, we might just wrap it up there." Needless to say, Mark didn't go on to do many school visits in future. He ended up on a radio career on Triple M. But it's quite interesting. And I just ask, getting back to the serious side, I ask you, what lies do you tell yourself? Because I still, from time to time, have these lies popping up. But now I'm at the point where I can extract them straight away. They don't bug me one bit. But so many people feel stuck in this space of doubts, fears, anxieties, and not understanding and connecting to their true potential. Now, if that's the case, if that's you, really got to start to understand and connect with the true potential that is you. Are you actually walking and living an authentic life? Are you working to your strengths? Are you setting goals? Do you have a circle of influence, people around you that are helping you extract these viruses and weeds from your mind? All this sort of stuff is stuff that collectively helps us become our best. The final piece of this puzzle is once you conceive the idea, you've got your goal, and goals are really important also in the finance area. Why is it most people retire with not enough money to sustain a lifestyle of retirement? Why? It's because they're not strategic enough. They don't put enough money away for the long term. They wait until they get into their older age and, wow, I've missed the opportunity. But so conceive the idea, we need to believe in ourselves, but we also need to make it happen and achieve what it is that's our potential. And from the point of view of making it happen, it is very much a matter of enacting and getting into the winning habits. The winning habits is what it's all about. We are creatures of habit. 95 to 97% of what we do every day is non-conscious. 95 to 97%. And if we get into the wrong habits, then we are going to push in the wrong spots. The wrong stuff's going to spit out. And more importantly, as parents, if we get in the wrong habits, what sins are we casting upon our children? You know, and the most important leadership role on the planet is not CEO of Coca-Cola or the Prime Minister of Australia. The most important leadership role on the planet is being a parent to a child, because you are responsible for essentially moulding the way they are, giving them the beliefs in their potential. And if we aren't able to do that ourselves, and not so much are we not able to, we're not working on improving ourselves as leaders, as parent leaders, then I think we're actually doing a disservice to our children. Having said that, we're also going to come across plenty of obstacles, because life is not a freeway. You think back over each and every one of your lives, it's not a freeway. Okay, there's lots of speed humps, there's lots of potholes, there's lots of detours, there's lots of dead ends. But what happens? You go down a dead-end street, you turn around, you come back, and only if you know where you're going to can you get back on course. Because so many people will end up in a dead-end street and go around in circles and doing donuts for years and years and years and years. Because you know what? Because they don't know where they want to get to. And from my point of view, if we learn to overcome a setback, and setbacks in life are not failures. Failures are when people don't have a crack, don't have a go. It's not because you didn't achieve a goal. If you didn't achieve a goal, that's called a lesson. If you didn't achieve a goal and you did the same thing over and over, that's failing. I heard a great quote from Michael Schumacher, the famous Formula One driver who crashed off the track in the late 90s in a British Grand Prix and had his legs, screws and pins put in his leg, and I saw an interview with him. And the journalist said, "You must be devastated you're out of the series." His response was, "If I never crash, I'll never know how fast I can go. I never crash, I'll never know how fast I can go." How much more could I have achieved if I was prepared to risk a setback? It's so many people don't put themselves in the position of stretching themselves, thereby never really reaching their full potential. In terms of my setbacks, I've had plenty of setbacks in my career. Probably the most serious one was an eye injury I sustained. I achieved my dream at 19 years of age playing first grade for the Tigers. Had a fantastic season that year. I never played a full lower grade game. They threw me straight into first grade at the start of the 1980 season because the first grade lock was injured. Basically put me straight up from the juniors. And 2 months later, I was playing for the city side, and that was a fantastic season. The very first trial game of the next year, I went to put a big hit on, and I had a massive big off-season, strengthened right up. I was going to, for me, it was going to continue the momentum. But what happened was the very first trial game of the next year, I went to put a big hit on a guy called Gavin Miller. He went to palm me off, and his thumb went straight through my eyeball and squashed my eye. And to the point where I just couldn't see. I was on the ground in pain. They rushed me to a hospital, to the eye hospital in Sydney, and my whole eye was just red, full with blood. They couldn't see what the damage was until the blood cleared, which took 2 days. I had to lie there still for 2 days. If I moved, they said I could have gone blind in that eye. So after 2 days, when the blood cleared, the doctor had a look, the surgeon, Dr. Hunyor is an Austrian guy. He said, "Vane, the operation is going to happen. we need to operate, you've got a detached retina. So I went into the surgery and had the retina detached. They put basically a silicone band around the eye to hold the eye together. And I came out of surgery. I can remember double iPads on coming out of anaesthetic, and I could hear Dr. Hunyor saying, "Vane, the operation very successful." That's my Austrian accent, by the way. I could add that. Any Austrians in here? I apologise. Okay, that's my Austrian accent. But he said, "Vane, the operation very successful." He said, "You'll be in 2 days in hospital. Then I want to see you Friday at my practice for checkup." So anyhow, I go home, and every day I'm taking the iPad off to check to see, because remember he says operation very successful. I'd interpret that as meaning I get full vision back. Okay, that's 34 years ago. I'm still blurred in that eye. I can see everybody, but like looking through 3 Coke bottles. But when he said operation very successful, I expect to have full vision back. So when I check each day and the vision isn't coming back, I'm starting to freak out, thinking I may not play footy again. So I go in to see him. He says, "Vane, how's it feeling?" I said, "I'm a bit worried, Doc. When I check the pads off the eye, vision not real good. Vane, come visit here. Sit down here." So he sits me down at that machine where they stick your head in like a little gadget, and then he gets the light, and he's looking in my eye. And he's going, "Very interesting. Very interesting. Huh." Then he says, "Stand up." So I stood up. He says, "Vane, come with me." And he walked me over to the window, and he said, "Vane, look up there. What do you see?" I said, "The sun, Doc. The sun." He said, "Vane, the sun is 93 million miles away. How much further do you want to see?" And that's a true story. And essentially, what he was saying to me was, hey, you've had an issue, you've got an issue, don't look at the negative, look at the positive. The positive is you have got vision in that eye. It's going to be fully robust enough to play footy. But don't focus on what you haven't got, focus what you have got. And that's a lesson I've taken with me ever since. Because so many of us focus on what we haven't got rather than focus on what we have got. And that's one of the reasons why so many people are so sad and so anxious, is because they're comparing themselves to others and what others have got, and they aren't happy and looking at what they do have. And those of us that have been to the poor countries around the world will see so many of these impoverished families and kids are so happy. Why? Because they're focusing on what they have got. They're not worried about not having the next big fancy flash television or car or house, and makes such a difference. I just wanted to thank you all once again for coming here tonight, I should say. It's great to see so many people coming along and donating to charity. My message, if I could summarise it all up, is this. It's to expect more, because there is more. Every one of us is nowhere near, or has never ever even scraped the edge of what we're really capable of. We might have done some great things in our lives. There's still more to do, and if we expect more, there will be a lot more. So, has anyone got any questions? I don't know. Do you want to do a little question and answer thing, Jace, or what? Has anyone got any questions? I don't know whether you might have gone to sleep. Hey, wakey. Anyone got any questions? I'll make one other point before I finish then, and we can all go home to bed. And that is that I asked the question, where are you on your journey of life? Because I believe there's three stages of life, of what I call consciousness. The first stage is the survival stage. And that's when, as kids, we're growing up, we're just looking to try and get on with life and make a life. And some people never move beyond that, because life is a constant struggle. Struggle to make ends meet. There's that belief that's maybe not quite there. Maybe the goals aren't quite there. Maybe I'm looking for outside resources to drive me, when in actual fact, the resourcefulness that I have in here has not really been fully utilised. But there's this survival mindset. But if I move beyond that and I start to use the resourcefulness that's really I'm embodying, I start to move into a space of the success mindset. And the success mindset is what our teachers embed in us in the school system. It's what society says life's about. It's what our families and parents are all about. And that is that you've got to go and do stuff with these skills to show people just what you're capable of. And what's that manifested as? It's manifested as me having a comfortable lifestyle with a nice house and a nice car and a nice big television and status around me and money to spend. That's success, yeah? And that's what is typically the big tick in the box if we've had a good life. But the fact is that doesn't necessarily always equate to fulfillment. Because I actually met Kerry Packer about 3 months before he died at a State of Origin function over the eastern suburbs. And I'd never spoken to the gentleman before, but I had a good chat to him that night. And he actually knew a fair bit about rugby league. We chatted about things. But it was a pleasant conversation, but he wasn't happy. Now, here's a guy that took some money from his father and created megabucks. He was very, very, very successful. But those of you who saw the How's That series on television will see he wasn't a happy man because he didn't quite grasp that there was another level above success. And that level above success, you must transit through the success, but the level above success is the mindset of significance. And significance is that mindset where you're giving to other people, where you're helping other people, where you're helping people grow. It's the mindset that true leaders have, that true parents have, that we all can embrace and embody, because the success mindset is about take. And there's a small group of people can benefit, maybe you and a few others, but the significance mindset is give, and so many other people can benefit. And there's so much fulfillment that comes from that. So for me, there's those 3 levels of consciousness that I would like people to reflect on. Where are you in that journey? So there's a question down the back. Yeah, I think rugby league's still pretty much a blue collar sport. When you look at it, it's not played in the private schools. It's still pretty much a blue collar sport. We have a lot of the Pacific Islanders now playing the game that come from backling backgrounds. I think a lot of the younger kids nowadays are from more affluent environments, like to when I grew up. You grow up in an environment where, it is what it is, but you don't think you're doing it tough. But looking back, it was a pretty tough sort of environment. But the thing is, the problem as a parent, me, and probably people like me, you want to give your kids more because you didn't have it, but in the process, you're softening them up. And it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. But I still think there's a lot of kids come from those sort of blue-collar environments, because rugby league it's a passport to them breaking free of the struggling mindset and struggling lifestyle. And for me, that's really what it proved to be for me as well, in more ways than one. Yeah, sorry, you got a question? Yeah, sorry, love. Yeah, and there's no. I mean, from my point of view, there's no formula for that. There's no formula for that at all. But for me, it was about following my heart. So what actually happened for me, and it happened for me at the age of 28. So what happened at the age of 28, which was a lot younger than probably what the first partial transition happened. And what happened was I realised at 28 that my life was, because up until then I was somebody who was, and I still am, orientated and driven by goals. But at the younger ages, what happened was I'd achieve one goal, I'd set the next one, move on to the next one. I didn't actually enjoy the moment, didn't enjoy the journey as much. And I got to a point where at 28, I said, I'm not interested in playing any more test matches. I really couldn't be bothered if I play any more State of Origins, because you know what? I want to win a competition at the Tigers. For me, that was the start of the significance mentality. And it then moved into the space where I then developed an appetite where I really want to coach, because I want to help players be better, and I want to develop young players, and I want to help people change their careers. And that then evolved and morphed into me. At the age of 40, I quit coaching, which is the second of the quarters. I quit coaching and I moved into what I'm doing now, working with companies and people and businesses and all that sort of stuff, helping them really realise their full potential. I do a lot of workshops, I run forums, I do all that sort of stuff with companies, and I'm in the next 12 months I'm going to start running some public seminars and all that sort of stuff as well, because so many people are looking for some tools which just aren't there at the moment, particularly older people like us. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Well, maybe you, not me. Yeah. So. Yeah, what I would do is I would attempt to line up the planets, right? I would attempt to line up the planets. And how do I line up the planets? I say, well, okay, what is it that I want to work towards? Assuming that I've got some idea of what I'm passionate about. What is it I want to work towards? Do I have the strengths that are going to help me get there? Am I passionate about that? And are my actions in alignment with that? So when I line all those up, and if I am able to line all those up, then it becomes an easy fit. If I don't have a passion and don't have the strengths and sort of aren't able to enact the behaviours that are going to get me to where I want to get to, then I'm not going to go there. What I did was I actually looked at what my strengths were and what I was passionate about, and I embarked on a journey. 13 years ago that happened, or nearly 14 years ago now, and the first 4 or 5 years was tuning the compass, fine-tuning the compass, fine-tuning. But the last 8 or 9 years, it's been very much, you know, I just feel this space of life's just so easy, you know. And I hope each of you can, if you're not there at the moment, that you get into that space, because it is something where I wake up every day and I think, wow, how good's today going to be? And I think that's, once again, getting back to this intention thing. Do you wake up in the morning and say, today's going to be the best day of my life so far? Because if you do, you're going to be off to a great start. Or do you wake up and just think, oh, geez, I've got another day to happen here? Because that's what happens. You place an intention around your actions every day. It starts with when you wake up in the morning. And I'm sort of... So we've got one more question, then everyone wants to go to bed, don't they? Yeah, surely. Yeah, so we got another question? I doubt it, yeah. If I didn't have, at that particular point, the way my life was going, I doubt that I would have gone in the direction that I'm going in, knowing what some of the people that were in my environment, what happened to them. I doubt that I would have, in fact, I strongly doubt that I would have gone anywhere in the direction that I'm gone in today. So for me, I was fortunate, and I in a way, I feel that I'm blessed that my father's been guiding me the whole time. And as I said, I mean, I'm not religious at all, but I'm very spiritual. And for me, that particular journey is one that was intentioned, but a lot of the stuff that's come into my life has come out of the blue. It's not something that I actually expected to happen, but I always had the intention. I knew where I wanted to go, and that's why I really urge you to live a mindful life that's based around intention, based around goals. So thanks a lot for coming along tonight, and